Welcome to Dialogue, a true crime conversation. I'm your host, Rebecca Sebastian, coming to you live from the middle of a blizzard while moving apartments during a pandemic in New York City. So just in case you are wondering how I'm doing, that should answer that and clear it right up. I'm hanging on, everybody, but by a thread. I cannot wait to be in the new space with my new setup. Everything's in disarray. It's completely chaotic. I'm a little unhinged. But I'm excited to sit down and record this intro because I get to share with you a couple of exciting things before the episode starts. First, you're going to hear something in the middle of the show, and it is a promo for another podcast. That happens from time to time on Dialogue. The interesting thing is that this promo is for a new podcast that I am launching. I'm really excited to share that I am launching a second podcast, and I'm co-hosting it with Melissa from the Moms and Murder podcast. So we've teamed up to do a show about the intersection of true crime, reality TV, and pop culture. It's called Criminality, because loving reality isn't a crime. And if you've been listening long enough, you've probably heard me talk about The Housewives. It is my escape from true crime. If I'm not listening to or watching true crime, it's probably Bravo. So this is a really fun project that is a little bit lighter and there's just levity and some nostalgia because we go back and talk about older reality shows. And I think it's just what 2021 called for. You know what I mean? So if you're into reality TV and true crime, I think you're really going to like Criminality. You can hear the promo in the middle of the show, and then you can go right over to wherever you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. We would be so grateful. I'm having a blast recording with Melissa. We officially launch on Friday, February 12th, and episodes will be every other Friday. We are also already on social media, so you can follow us at Criminality Show. Stay tuned for that. Again, links in the show notes. And now, I can't wait for you to hear my interview because it's with Tori Telfer. And for anyone who's been on the Dialogue journey from day one will remember, or if you don't remember, let me refresh your memory. She was my very first guest. Before she or I really knew what Dialogue podcast was, she said yes to being on, and she's an amazing author. She's written a second book. She's had a baby. She has a second podcast. It's like lots of new big changes in her world, and she shares all of them, as well as something truly alarming for what's keeping her up at night. So come to hear her new book stories and hear about her adorable baby Cecil, and stay for the shocker at the end. I'll give you a hint. John Wayne Gacy. Okay, I think I've said enough. I am so grateful for everybody who's filled out the survey. Thank you so much. That survey is still open. So last week, I'm just mentioning this now because I totally forgot. I created a survey and I want listeners to fill it out. That is also in the show notes. Your feedback would be so appreciated as I plan out the rest of 2021. So with that, go to the show notes. There's so much good stuff in there today, including everywhere you can find Tori's book, work, podcast, etc. And now let's kill the small talk with Tori Telfer. I am so happy, Tori, to have you back on Dialogue. You were, as you know, my very first guest, and we said on that day, like, oh my gosh, you'll have to come back when your second book is out, and here we are.
We did. We're finally here. Yes, I'm thrilled to be back.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you. And since you were on, we have talked, you and I, but not on the podcast, but since you were on Dialogue, you have birthed another podcast, a second book, and an actual baby.
Yes.
Tell us first about the baby.
Oh, great. Okay, my favorite subject. The baby's name is Cecil. He is almost 14 months, if you can believe it, but he still counts as a baby.
Yes.
In my mind. I am
Absolutely.
Not giving up that term for a while.
You don't have to.
Thank you. Thank you. Some people are like, we can't call him baby anymore, right? And I'm like, I don't want to hear that. I'm cutting you out of my life for saying that.
I mean, if this helps at all, my youngest's name is Gabe, and we still call him Gaby Baby,
Perfect.
And he's going to be 16 in April.
That's what I need to hear.
So, yeah.
The permission I needed.
Yeah.
So Cecil is awesome, and he is my little partner in crime with these projects, because he's like often like around my, like crawling around my feet as I'm, trying to finish up an outline or whatever. And he was, when I was finishing up the revisions for my second book, he was like 6 months. So he was just like laying next to me, or, I mean, it wasn't, all silence. There were
Yeah.
there was also a lot of parenting going on, but he's been great. I feel like having him around has not detracted from my work. I mean, it has taken time away, you know, from my work, which is fine, which is a great thing. But like, there is something about having him around that it's like helped my work. It's like makes me excited or something.
Okay, so Cecil, and gosh, between our first interview on Dialogue and today, we did an onstage event together. Remember those?
Yeah. There were like 100 people there, which is now horrifying.
I know.
This was
like
no
idea.
In October though, so we were fine.
It was October of 2019.
Yeah,
so none of us knew what was around the corner.
Yeah.
Thank God. But you were so very pregnant.
I know.
And then, so then you had the baby, and then 2020 happened, and you've done all of that in that time period during COVID. So before we get into the book, because right now I'm in this series of true crime authors. So glad that your book is coinciding nicely with that. But you launched another podcast, or you are hosting another podcast.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm co-hosting a podcast called Red Flags, which is out from Investigation Discovery, the true crime channel I'm sure we're all familiar with.
Oh yeah.
And let's see, how did it even happen? Basically, I got an email from the producer in, I don't know, this past fall, and I had been thinking about restarting my own podcast, Criminal Broads, which I never really thought I would restart because it had been so much work. I know you understand what it's like to be a one-woman podcast show. It's so much work. And, you know, I had put it on hold, and then I had my baby, and I was like, I don't know if I can ever justify it. But by last fall, I started sort of getting the podcasting itch again. And then this producer reached out, and I was like, well, this is kind of convenient timing. And it would be nice to work with other people for a change, you know, like with a team.
Yeah.
So Red Flags, where do I start? It's a true crime podcast, basically, but we're trying to be, I know, it's a cooking show. We're trying to be like kind of holistic, if I can say, or like a one-stop shop where we open the podcast by chatting about what we're reading or listening to. I actually talked about dialogue on our most recent episode.
Oh, yay. Thanks.
So, you know, yeah, of course, like a chatty opening, and then we deep dive into a case, but also maybe an issue. Like we did an episode that I'm really proud of on the families of perpetrators, which is a very under talked about coalition of people.
Agreed.
So, yeah. So it's nice because it's kind of, we can kind of explore our various interests within the world of true crime, which I know you do on your show too. It's like there's so many angles you can take, and it's nice to have a chance to go into them.
Yeah, it's a departure from a lot of podcasts out there, and with TV networks, a lot of time they're very one case specific or one theme, and yours really is kind of going in a lot of directions in a really cool, interesting way. And I love who they paired you with. Karina Michelle is lovely. Yeah,
Karina Michelle has, no big deal, 200,000 followers on her true crime TikTok.
Amazing. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, she's great. And she comes at it from a more like social media, sociology, like just interacting, like she, I think, interacts with far more true crime fans and consumers than I do. So she's coming at it from that perspective. I'm coming at it from like writer interested in history, doesn't really know what TikTok is perspective. So we're a great match.
Definitely. No, I really like it. Well, congratulations on that. That's very cool.
Thanks.
And so then did Criminal Broads just get resurrected again? Did you pick that up? I feel like you did.
Zombie-like, she emerged from the grave and she was like, I am not done with you. I don't even know. I just couldn't quit her. I just started getting the feeling. I just started missing it. You know, it's like, I'm sure you would have the same experience with dialogue if you took a hiatus. I just started missing like going, like writing my own scripts. It's so different from Red Flags too. It's scripted. It's called Criminal Broads. It's obviously about criminal women or women who fight crime. I missed like doing the deep dives, doing the script. I missed my listeners. They're so nice.
You have good listeners. They're really dedicated.
I don't know how I got them, but I just feel like everyone who reaches out is always so nice and like willing to think through things with me. Like I just did the most terrifying episode of my life on Lisa Montgomery, the woman who was just executed by the federal government, first woman to be executed by the government in almost 70 years. Yeah. And her case is so tough because she was horrifically abused and her crime was horrific. And there's just no deny. Like both of those things are true no matter what you think or believe about the death penalty. Yes. And I was so scared to release that episode because it's, first of all, it's the death penalty. Like people do not see eye to eye on this. And it's a very serious issue. Yeah. And also, I don't like to cover very graphic cases. I rarely do. Mm-hmm. So there were just a lot of reasons why I was like, I shouldn't do this. But at the same time, I just felt like it's so disingenuous to have a podcast about criminal women when something this historic is happening and like to not cover it. So long story short, I released this episode with a lot of trepidation and my listeners were just like, they just got it. And like, even, I have a lot of anti-death penalty listeners, but I do have some who did think she should get the death penalty, but they were nice about saying that. Like in this day and age, in these polarized times, I feel like I really lucked out with them.
Well, that really is no small feat because like you said, the death penalty is not a small topic. Mm-mm. And like you said, it's polarizing. People hold very different points of view, but they also feel strongly about those points of view. This is not like a neutral-ish topic. Most people aren't like, I don't know, like you could take it or leave it. They feel like, no, they are for it or they are against it. So I think it's a testament to the way you put content out and the way you tell a story. I do. There's nuance and there's room for that. And I think in true crime, I think we're moving towards a place where people are just a little bit more willing to explore that gray, that tension. Can two things be true at the same time that are different? And Lisa Montgomery's case is a perfect example of that. Yeah. Yeah. But it's hard.
It's hard. Yeah. And it's not something you want to like spend all day, every day thinking about because it's literally too sad.
It's too sad, too dark.
It's too dark. And I mean, I even had someone reach out to me. It was his 40th birthday. And he was like, I love your podcast, but I had to turn off the episode. Yeah, but thank you for making it anyway. I was like, my gosh. You do not have to listen to this episode on your birthday.
Yeah, you also weren't kidding. You do have the nicest listeners. They're like, apologies for not finishing, but thank you for making it anyway.
The nicest.
My gosh.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the death penalty is something I've like slowly, it took me, over a year of podcasting to be comfortable enough to like even state my stance on my show, which is, I just felt like we kind of got to a point in the country where like not coming down definitively on something was problematic. And so I wasn't hammering it in anywhere, but I was in a natural flow of conversation. If it came up, I would, say what I thought. It's a tough one.
It really is. I don't know why it seems so much tougher than other issues in true crime because it's not like we're not talking about death a lot all the time in this, but I understand. It feels very scary to talk about.
I think it exposes different interpretations of justice. And that can feel scary. If we don't agree on what justice is, then how are we doing justice? How do we do the thing?
Yeah. I think it's also like people, how do I even want to say this? People just disagree on, maybe this is what you just said, but people just disagree on what deserves what, like what types of crimes deserve what type of punishment. Right. And that's really hard. And I'm very empathetic to that. I don't think the death penalty is right for several reasons, but I'm actually very empathetic to people who do think it's right. I'm not empathetic to people who are just like, kill all the criminals, you know. But I know people who really struggle and with these horrific crimes and do come down on the side of like justice is execution. And while I don't agree with that, I understand how you get there, because like, yeah, like there are people who have done horrible things, like especially when you think about someone like Ted Bundy getting executed. You know, I understand how people arrive on the side of like,
of course, that
is what should have happened. So I think, yeah, go ahead.
No, I couldn't agree more. And particularly where family members of victims come, like that's just a place I would never encroach. Yeah. To say, well, I think it's wrong. You know, I think they deserve all the space in the room to have their feelings on that. And, you know, it's the courts and the state's decision, which is also a weird thing about it. But
yeah, I know.
Maybe we've covered that topic enough for today. Yeah. And, you know, something we talked about on my very first episode was how the genre is expanding and changing to include not just murder all the time. So your first book, Lady Killers, was a focus on female serial killers, which is a very specific deep dive you did. And this book, also focused on women, called Confident Women, is about con women.
Yeah, so, much lighter.
So much lighter, so much more, dare I say, fun.
Yes.
Even the title, the cover, it's so cute, the cover. I love the cover.
I love the cover so much.
Did you have like influence in that, or were you just so pleasantly surprised?
I had no influence on it. Like I did nothing for the design, but when it came out, I was like, I love it. And then we did have some back and forth rounds where I was like, can you do a wig that looks like this to match this woman? And so, yeah. So, but the idea is not mine at all. I'm so happy with it. And if you put it next to Lady Killers, they kind of look like they resonate with they're in dialogue with each other, shall I say?
Yes, I love it. They're complementary for sure. So I want to start with the title of Confident Women. Obviously, the word confident has the word con in it, and you talk about the meaning of confident. And so tell me how you arrived at that description for these women.
Well, I have to credit my agent because she actually came up with the final version of the title. My first idea was Confident Ladies, because I was thinking Lady Killers, like I want to, like it's not a sequel, but it's obviously thematically linked.
Yep.
So I was trying to like keep the word ladies in there. But then she was like, no, you should do Confident Women because it's almost confidence women. So the women in this book are technically confidence women. Con artist is short for confidence artist, which I think people don't necessarily know.
They don't. I don't.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah. So that's how we landed on it. And I like it because if you just hear the title, you might think it's a self-help book, like how to be more confident, ladies.
Yes.
But it's very much not that. But I sort of like that little like
it's
weird.
It's cheeky. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like I'm not saying that women or that anyone should be like the women in this book, but I do like the idea of readers wondering that and grappling with that, like. Am I telling you should be a confident woman just like the women in this book? You know? So
right.
Yeah.
But am I right in feeling like you have a little bit of an affinity for these women?
Yes. I mean, definitely. And some more than others because this book, it is lighter than Lady Killers, but also not really. Like it gets very dark. It goes to very dark places and people are killed. So I hesitate to be, even though it is easy for me to slip into the state that we all slip into with con artists, which is like, wahoo, how fun are they? Like, look at all those wigs. They're fabulous, you know, and they're really fun until you see the trail of damage behind them. So you're right in saying that I have an affinity for them, but that is something I tried to grapple with a little bit in the intro and the conclusion. Like, like why do we have this affinity? And in having that affinity, are we forgetting, you know, like who they really are? And I think the answer is yes. Like, I think that's part of the con is how much we like them.
Okay. So how hard was it to find women throughout history that have a, you know, documented story of cons?
I think it was easier than Lady Killers, but also keep in mind, like, I know so much more now. Like, I had done it once before, so I feel like my research skills have really improved. Plus,
Wow.
Criminal Broads is basically like every episode is basically a book chapter. So
Yes.
I just felt a lot more confident.
Yeah.
A lot more able to, go through the newspaper archives online and find interesting old stories and stuff. But I think, and I don't have hard academic stats to back this up, but I do think there are more female con artists than female serial killers. I just felt like I did have more options. I certainly found a more diverse range of women than I was able to find for my first book.
Interesting.
And I didn't limit myself by era this time. For Lady Killers, as I think we talked about, I stopped in the 1950s. I didn't want anyone to still be around. I just wanted to keep it vintage. But for con women, I didn't do that. So, I had the wealth of cons that have happened in the past 70 years, as well as like cons from the beginning of time. So yeah, it was definitely easier.
Yeah, and fun. There's something about the recent stories that I get excited about. Not that I don't enjoy the historical ones, but when I see like a date and time that I was alive for and could remember and like understand the context of the world at that time, I get really excited.
Yeah.
So you kind of break them down into different motivators. I don't know if that's an accurate way to describe it, but I'm afraid to even say this word, and I can't believe I didn't know it. But
it's probably a word I made up. Is it? Which one? The first one?
I don't know. No, it's
tragedians.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that a word? It's a word.
I think it is technically a word. I'll say it again. The tragedians. Now I'm nervous that I'm mispronouncing it.
No, you're saying it right, because when I figured it out, I'm like, oh, it's like comedians. No, it's not.
Tragedians?
Tragedians. Yeah, comedians.
I think it's a word. I need to fact check this now. But you're not the first interviewer who has struggled to pronounce it to make you feel better.
That does make me feel better.
You are not. I think the word, I think of the word as describing like Sarah Bernhardt, like those old school, like dramatic actresses who played Lady Macbeth. Right. I stole it for my book. That I am putting it on con women. That's like not a previous category for them, but I stole it to describe women who specifically use real life tragedies to do their cons, which is there are a lot of those. Men too. I mean, it's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. And I think that was so, I guess it didn't surprise me, but you do go into depth around it that, when these world sort of tragic events happen, the best of human spirit rises up to kind of come together and help. But simultaneously, those deceptive sort of people who see opportunity also come up to the surface and rear their heads and leverage it for their gain. So what do you think is at the heart of that? And I guess it depends on the way it plays out, and I'd love to explore a couple today, maybe give readers a little taste of what's inside the book. And these are on one is on the somewhat lighter end of it, but the two I want to talk about, maybe we could start, and again, I'm afraid to pronounce, maybe you could tell us her name, referring to the Chinese woman who married a soccer player and then dated the gymnast.
Okay, so her name is Wang Ti.
Okay,
and I will say she's not a tragedian, just for the record.
Oh, she isn't.
I have her in the first category, the glitterati.
The glitterati. Oh, that makes so much sense. That makes much more sense.
Do you want to talk about her still, or do you want to?
I still want to talk about her. I have lots of questions about Wang Ti. Maybe can you set the context for her?
Yes, I literally have my book open here because
good,
it's been a minute.
Story time with Tori.
I'm realizing the problem with writing books and then going on podcasts to talk about them is I have never said any of these words out loud.
Right?
I have probably not read a single sentence from this book out loud. So you really realize I don't know. I don't know how to say that.
But what's interesting is as I read it, I could hear you narrating it like Criminal Broad style. When you say your episodes are like a chapter of the book, that totally tracks, because when I'm reading it, just the way you write is the way you also narrate. So I love that.
Thank you. I try to do that. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Wang Ti. So we're in 2008. So pretty modern for Tori, pretty edgy. Yeah. And we're in Beijing. So Wang Ti was basically born into an ordinary life, you know, like not very wealthy. Her dad was a handyman. Her mom was a bank clerk. Normal life. Went to college, whatever. But I think that she always had dreams of something more, which isn't that weird. I mean, a lot of us have that, you know? But she definitely saw herself as special, which is a very big threat. A lot of these women seem to have this yearning from an early age to be like someone with a capital S. So she marries a soccer player, a professional soccer player, which kind of like, it doesn't catapult her into wealth, but it like step stools her into wealth and a little bit of celebrity. You know, he's an athlete, like he's hot, he makes good money. She starts hanging out with his teammates' wives, and they call themselves the Mrs. Group, and they're just like the fabulous soccer player wives, and she is the most fabulous of them all. But it's not enough for her. They're fighting, their marriage is strained. So in 2008, she leaves him and moves to Beijing to just, she doesn't divorce him yet, but just like, I don't know, they fight, she goes off, wants to start a new life, or maybe just wants to have a break from him or something. And what she finds in Beijing is incredible wealth. So Beijing at the time was like a lot of big cities, like there were a lot of extremes there. There was a lot of poverty. There was a lot of smog in the air. But then there was incredible wealth where, like, if you were rich, you could send your kid to a private school that was having a dome built over it to keep the air clean.
Unbelievable.
So people were literally breathing different air. It's not even just a figure of speech there.
Right.
And so Wang Ti arrives, and I'm assuming she's kind of looking around and seeing all this. Oh, and another important thing to know, Beijing had just had the Summer Olympics, the 2008 Summer Olympics. And these were the most expensive Summer Olympics of all time. And just everything glittering, everything like technologically advanced. They had weather modification technology that guaranteed it wouldn't rain. You know, it was just like a spectacle.
Yeah.
So after the Olympics are over, you've got all these really hot, young, gold medalist athletes hanging around Beijing, right? Having a glass or 5 of champagne.
Sounds amazing.
Right? Like, we did it. We made our country proud. We're going to take a break. So because Wang Ti is connected to athletic circles, she gets invited to a wedding of two gymnasts? She makes friends with a lot of gymnasts. She gets invited to a wedding of some Olympic athletes. And I think her husband technically was invited, but she was like, I'll be taking her place. Thank you.
This arrangement she's managed with the husband is incredible.
I know. He's sending her checks.
Right.
She's like going to the wedding, and I imagine like taking his place card off the table and flinging it to the side. So she goes to the wedding, and she is seated next to a very attractive Olympic gymnast.
Yeah.
He has just won a gold medal for his country, and he is really dreamy. Like, I don't know. I mean, he's a gymnast. He's hot. What more do I need to say? You understand. They flirt. He takes her out on a date. He has like this armored car come and pick him up. You know, she's very much seeing this next level of wealth and celebrity and influence, and she is intrigued by it. So they actually start dating, and she starts feeling pressure to sort of keep up with him and make him continue to think that she is a wealthy and important person. Like, she has her Louis Vuitton bag, she has her flashy Audi car. I don't know cars. Audi, not Audi. She has her flashy car. She has her new cell phone. Like, she has these signifiers of wealth that make her able to fit into this world of these Olympic athletes. But she has to keep them up. And the reason she has these Louis Vuitton purses, etc., is because her estranged husband is sending her checks. But that's not a very nice backstory, especially when you're trying to date an Olympian, right? It's like, like, she's like, I could do better. So she explains her quote-unquote wealth with a very intriguing backstory that very cleverly uses Chinese politics to like bolster itself up. So basically she says that she is the secret love child of two very important politicians, but the two politicians, her alleged mom and dad, were having an affair with each other. So no one can fact check her story.
It's perfect.
Because it's perfect. And she's actually there are two women in this book who do this exact same con, like 100 years apart and, an ocean away from each other. But this con of like, I am the daughter of a very important man, but he had an affair. So you can't go to the important man and ask if I'm his daughter.
It's foolproof. It's
foolproof. Like, he'll behead you, basically. Like, not really, but, like, you just can't do that to certain very important men. And this story, if it were true, would have made Wang Ti a princeling, which was the term for the sons and daughters of politicians who were, like, in the old communist guard in China. And princelings are a real thing, and they are very wealthy, and they are very influential, and they're just untouchable. Like, in the chapter, I compared them to, like, Kennedys or now, like, Trumps, I mean, it's not a perfect comparison, but just kind of, like, the jobs just are given to them. Like, the doors open up for them. They want to walk through a door, they walk through the door. Like, daddy will make it happen. Yeah. So Wang Ti basically is like, I'm a princeling. And her friends are like, cool.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Like, we're Olympic celebrities. You're a princeling. Let's go. Let's hang out. Yeah. Yeah. She gets invited to their weddings, like just these extravagant affairs where the bride appears in a hot air balloon.
This blows my mind.
The groom climbs up a rope to the hot air balloon to reach her. They're both gymnasts, so they can do this type of thing. Like, I don't know about your wedding, but like, I definitely I was not prepared to be climbing up any ropes or rappelling down from things.
No cool optics at my wedding. No stunts. No stunts at all.
No stunts. No athletic like prowess displayed.
I did win the limbo.
At your wedding?
Mm-hmm.
That's so cute.
4 months pregnant. So maybe there were stunts now that I think about it.
I don't know how you did that.
I don't either. I was very young.
Good for you. Good for you.
Hey guys, Melissa from Moms and Murder here, inviting you to check out my new show, Criminality, where I'll be taking a look at crime and reality TV with my co-host, Rebecca Sebastian.
Hi friends, I'm Rebecca, host of DIE-ALOGUE, a true crime conversation.
Face it, we all love to hate reality TV because what's better than escaping your dumpster fire of a life than watching someone else's? Join us as we discuss everything from a teen mom with feathers in her hair to a 90-day fiance who enjoys a box of matches, and we may just call Nancy Joe while wearing our best pair of little brown BB shoes that only cost $29.
And we can't forget the true crimes of the Real Housewives. Guys, they all have mugshots. That's where I'll be lending my expertise. We'll break it all down for you every other Friday beginning February 12th, 2021.
So go to criminalityshow.com and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Criminality, because loving reality isn't a crime.
And then her con gets a second layer, which is ultimately what ends up getting her thrown into jail. Spoiler alert. She feels that she needs to, her husband stops sending her checks. Because he's like, why do you need so much money? And she can't say like, well, my new boyfriend is making me buy him a lot of cars, which was what was happening.
Yeah, he's like a petulant, brat who has wealth, but he requires her to buy him stuff. Like, he doesn't sound great, but anyway.
No, he would maybe not threaten is the right word, but like, he would be like, if you don't buy me this, my other girlfriend will.
Yeah, oh my gosh, so awful.
I know, and he loved fancy cars, So she needs more wealth, basically, and she starts this real estate con, which is terrifyingly simple, ? Don't try this at home. But basically, she rents houses, or apartments, condos, etc. And she tells her friends, because of my political connections, because remember, I'm a princeling, I get really good deals on real estate. And so if you want to buy this fancy condo from me, I'll give you a really good deal. So her friends are like, great. And they hand her money. And she's just renting it this entire time. She's just renting it. But she she fools them for a couple of reasons. First of all, her friends are these young athletes who, weirdly, even though they are Olympians, they're very sheltered. This is a problem, actually. I worked with a researcher on this chapter, and she told me that it's a problem in China. You have athletes getting scammed a lot because they're isolated from society because of their training. So they don't develop that, sixth sense or whatever you have when you're like in the real world and you're like, sometimes people don't mean what they say.
Right. And they've been given an enormous amount of money at a very young age.
Yeah. So it's very sad. They're, even though they are these glittering celebrities, they're very vulnerable. So they believe her. And another reason they believe her is because her boyfriend is one of them.
Right.
Like, and she says she's a princeling. It's very much like, we respect power, right? Even if we maybe shouldn't. Like, if someone shows up in a uniform or like tells us they're important, I think a lot of us, our first instinct is just like, okay, I'm not going to ask for your credentials.
Right.
So when you have this quote unquote princeling with this Olympic boyfriend saying like, trust me, I have a deal on real estate, I own this place. What are they? They're not going to like go digging around in the forms and then, the deeds or whatever. Yeah. So anyway, her con can't last because there is no, she doesn't own any of these places. It was always going to eventually be revealed. And when it is revealed, very dramatically, her victims go after her and like won't let her eat or drink water and are like, give us back our money. And she eventually gets arrested by the police, and she expresses relief because she's been lying for so long. And
I get that.
Yeah, I know. It's very stressful to read about her. So yeah, she does express some relief at just not having to lie anymore, not having to pretend. She was doing all this pretending on multiple levels.
So she gets arrested and she gets a life sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think she ends up doing the whole sentence, right?
Yeah.
Serving that whole time. But that seemed aggressive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a real crime.
Yeah.
But what did you think of that sentence? That seemed steep.
It does seem steep. She conned a lot of people, like between 20 and 30, and she stole, the equivalent of just millions and millions of dollars. Okay. So it was like, but I agree, it is steep. Like, it was a big con. There are a lot of lesser cons out there. Like, she was very successful. But yeah, it was steep, and I don't know, maybe it was a bit of a like making an example of her type of situation. She's still in she's still in prison, but now she's going to be released in, let me just find it. Her sentence has been reduced for good behavior. She's scheduled to get out of prison in 2035. But still, it's a long time.
She's doing a long time. Yeah.
She's doing a long time. Yeah.
So you've put her under this glitterati bucket, and that makes sense. So it was the driving motivator for her was like the optics of wealth and fitting in and like spinning a story, maintaining a story that she started.
Yeah. I don't think that she was ever like really wealthy. Like, she definitely would never have reached the level of wealth of some of her friends, like her Olympic friend who had her wedding in the hot air balloon. Oh not in the hot air balloon, excuse me. Just arrived in a hot air balloon.
Just the appearance, yeah.
There's only one hot air balloon. I'm confused why we're all stressed. Just one. But yeah, it was optics, exactly. And so I call her I gave this section the title The Glitterati, and I put two other women in there who also were obsessed with, it wasn't just a straightforward like obsessed with getting wealthy, but it was an obsession with looking wealthy, with having people think you're wealthy,
associating
and not just wealthy
with
but important,
elite. Yes.
Yeah, rubbing elbows with the elite, walking into those exclusive spaces.
Right. And is this where you bring in Anna Sorokin?
Yeah.
In this, yes.
In this chapter, yeah.
There's definitely Anna Delvey, Anna Sorokin vibes.
Yeah,
for the story.
Yeah, I brought Anna into the Wang Ti chapter. I didn't do a separate chapter on her because there's been so much written about her recently.
Yeah.
But I brought her into the Wang Ti chapter, and I was honestly kind of salty when I did so because I was following her case while, I mean, no one knew it, but I was like working on this book behind the scenes and following her case and seeing everyone act like this was the first time a woman had ever conned.
And you were like, hold on, people, you've got no idea.
Yeah, and like also people kept referring to her as like this distinctly American story. And I was like, meet Wong Ti. Like, she's doing the exact same thing a couple years earlier and like making way more money from it.
That's really interesting that they want to attribute this to some kind of American greed story.
Absolutely. I mean, I get it, and I probably like do that myself in the book. It's like, it's so easy to be like the American dream.
Right.
Like just push it a little farther and you get a con.
Yeah.
So it's not that there's nothing there, but also the impetus to con is not unique to America or to today or to it's universal.
Human.
It's
human.
And so I really wanted to feature Wong Ti just as like a wait a minute guy is like this is happening all over. It is interesting though, like there are things about Wong Ti versus Anna Delvey versus whoever that are unique to their countries. Like, because con artists use the situations they're in. So
and
Wong Ti, yeah. So like certain things she did were very unique to Beijing, to Chinese politics, to the Chinese, athletic industrial complex.
Right.
But that is only because she was there and she was using it. It's not because conning is like distinctly Chinese or distinctly American or distinctly anything, you know?
Yeah, they're going to leverage and manipulate the environment they find themselves in.
Exactly.
And Anna wasn't even born in America, was she?
No, she was
Russian.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she has a uniquely New York story because that's where she kind of started her whole thing.
Exactly.
So wild, the story of Wong Ti, and not easily Googleable because I really wanted to see her face.
I know. Yeah.
I wanted to picture her because I had my image.
I can send you a picture. Yeah.
I was able to finally find one, but the article was behind a paywall, so I didn't read it, but I did get to see one picture.
Yeah.
So if you have more, I would look at them.
I will try. This, yes, I like I said, I worked with a translator on this chapter because a lot of it is in Chinese. So
yeah.
I was definitely like, it's challenging. It's so challenging when you're researching something where a lot of it is in another language because you're like, you feel so vulnerable. You're just
oh
like,
my gosh, yes.
Google Translate can only get you so far, and that answer is not very far.
That's so true. I've never had that experience until recently. I'm actually starting a second podcast with another woman.
You are?
Yeah, I can't even like fully announce it quite yet, but
I'm
very
so
exciting. And I'm doing a story, and it took place in Paris. And the best articles, it happened to an American that we know and a celebrity in Paris. I've already said too much.
Kim Kardashian?
It might be. So
Rebecca, I'm so
Tori just screamed. It's not a whole podcast about her, but that's the one story.
I'm so excited
covering
about the theme of the podcast, though. I'm extrapolating outwards.
Oh, Tori, we'll talk about it offline, and everybody else listening, you will hear about it soon.
Oh my
gosh. But the coverage of it really continued over in France and England. So I was lucky if like the Daily Mail covered it, although then it's the Daily Mail, but it's in English. But most of it was in French. And so I called in like a French friend and anyway, Google Translate. But yeah, it is. You do feel vulnerable and you do feel like that's primary source you don't want to miss.
No,
but it's hard.
It's hard. And then
really
there's cultural nuances that's why it's so nice to work with a translator who's from that culture.
Yeah.
Like my translator was also not just literally translating articles for me, but she was like, they would do this, they wouldn't do this. Like she really saved me.
Yeah, there's just some things you will never, that aren't literal translation, that are contextual, intangibles. So good job. I will not be having a translator or researcher on this one episode of the new podcast, but I will do my best not to totally, what. Okay, so that was Glitterati, and I did want to just touch on, and it's so much weirder and sadder in a way. Like I can almost, I don't think I would ever perpetuate like a scheme like that, but I understand the wanting to keep up with something, being somebody with a capital S, Anna Delvey, Wong Ti. I kind of get it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, like a lot of women and girls in middle school maybe do that on like a very small scale, right?
Completely.
Like pretend they have something they don't, or like a beach house or something, just for
Yeah.
example. I don't know. I never did that, but it's coming to mind for some reason. But the tragedy, yeah, exactly. The tragedian.
Yeah.
So this is a woman motivated by being at the center of tragedy and like attention, and wants to like connect with people on a real level, but about something that didn't necessarily happen to them.
Yes.
Can you talk about that and the woman that you cover in the book, just maybe like briefly?
Sure. So yeah, this is a very sad type of con. And this is, of all the cons in my book, this type where you link yourself to tragedy, even though you didn't experience it, people hate this type of con the most. Like, these women got the most vicious headlines, you know? So I have one chapter on 3 of these women. I'll tell you about one of them, Tanya Head. But this is a big area of cons. I spoke to someone, the CEO of Charity Navigator, and they are a nonprofit that just like keeps an eye on charities, basically, and it's like legit, not legit. And he said this happens with every tragedy. Like, and by tragedy I mean a school shooting, a bombing, a tsunami, an earthquake, the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, there have been these cons about so anytime something bad happens where most of us are like, oh, this is awful, like, should I donate to the Red Cross? These, I'm calling tragedians, will rise up and take advantage. And yeah, I mean, I could talk all day about like all of the women and men who have done this type of thing. It's really kind of macabre. Like,
it really,
ghoulish.
really is. And the one, Tanya Head, which is so weird, is there's no financial component.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of them are trying to make money. They'll be like, you know, they'll throw up a Kickstarter that's like, my house was destroyed in the earthquake.
Yeah.
And of course, people aren't necessarily gonna take time to fact check because they feel sad, and that's the genius of these cons. Is like they use that sense of urgency. But Tanya Head is a little different. She claimed to be a survivor of 9/11, and she fooled people for a long time. And she actually became the head of a 9/11 survivors advocacy organization. So she actually did a lot of good stuff, because people who actually survived 9/11, like people who were actually in the World Trade Center and got out, turned into this forgotten group of people because, and it's like so sad to think about, but you know, the tragedy happens, right? We're all reeling as a country, as a world, really. And the resources go to, you know, the families of people who died, the firefighters, and people who lived kind of ended up getting a little bit forgotten about because, like, they lived. Yeah. But as you can easily imagine, they are so traumatized. You know, they have PTSD, they have suicidal thoughts, and it's made worse when, like, they try to go to ground zero for the ceremonies and they're turned away. So it's heartbreaking. So Tanya Head shows up, and for a long time, she just hints that she has this story, but she won't say what it is. But she says she's a survivor. And eventually she, like, you know, like, deigns to, like, open up and be vulnerable. And she tells this really horrific story involving, like, a fiance or husband, depending on who she's telling, who was killed in the North Tower. And she says basically her story is the most dramatic survivor story you could possibly have. Yeah. She says she was on the floor of the South Tower where the plane came through the window. So, like, she could not have been any closer to the heart of the inferno if she tried. And she talks about seeing her. I mean, it's just very gruesome details, right?
Gruesome details, and super specific on like the time, the exact time, right? 9:03 or whatever she
like
said.
Who did what and what floor I was on, and then what floor I moved to, and she used details of things that really happened. Like, she said a man with a red bandana saved her, and there really was a man with a red bandana who saved a lot of people. He was a real man. And the tragedians do this. They use real details because it, of course, makes them sound more real and more convincing. And I think the creepiest detail, like maybe literally the creepiest detail in my book, is that Tanya had dinner with the family of the man with the red bandana.
Yeah,
I put it in parentheses because like I didn't have time to go into it more. But like, is that not just so disturbing? She sat down with them and was like, "Your son saved me." Oh, and he died, by the way.
Right, I was going to say he ended up losing his life to the tragedy while after helping all these people.
Yeah,
it is so brazen to show up there to that dinner.
His mom. I know.
I don't. That's kind of where I like. It's really hard to connect to that, to relate, and to understand. What do you think is in her that creates the ability to sit down and have that dinner and like look in their eyes? Like that is that like more than a financial scheme, that is so heartless and just cruel.
Yeah, I really think, I'm just speculating, but I do not think she was thought of herself as heartless or cruel at all. I think she was kind of like an energy vampire, honestly. Ooh. Just needed the attention and the sympathy and her dream. She, as people who uncovered her real identity later found out, she did have some trauma in her life. Like she was in a bad car accident and like lost her arm and it was reattached, and her dad was thrown into jail for financial crime. So she had a hard life. She was a wealthy girl from Spain. She wasn't even in America.
I know. When she wasn't in America when it happened. Right.
No. But I think that I think she was always a dreamer, always prone to dreaming, had these tragedies, and something got mixed up or crossed, and it sort of turned into like, I need your attention. Like, I need you to feel really bad for me. I need to be the most, like, I need to have suffered the most. Like, of all the people who suffered in 9/11, I need to be the one that was on the floor where the plane came through the windows.
Right.
And so I think when she's sitting down with the man in the red bandana's family, like, she's not thinking like, oh, you fools, I have fooled you. She's probably like in her, so deep in character that she doesn't even, she's probably like, yeah, thank you. It was really hard.
Right. And she's, deluded herself into thinking she's generously like creating an environment for healing.
For healing to happen. I know.
Yeah.
It's really, I vacillate between feeling bad for her and then just feeling rage. Like, how dare you? Because like people really did survive. Like, there are real survivors, and she was getting so much. She was, again, like sucking the energy away from them.
Oh, God, it's brutal. Well, those are just two of the amazing con women you cover. And I recommend all your work, but your most recent book, so much. It comes out on February 23rd. So, Tori, as you know, before I let my guests go, I have to ask, what is keeping you up at night?
Okay. I recently had my mind blown by a chat with a lawyer who's doing some digging into the John Wayne Gacy mythos, as he calls it.
Mythos?
Yeah. And I came away from our talk, I literally texted my husband in all caps, like, nothing is real.
What?
Like, everything is corrupt or something. I mean, how do I even distill it down? We just talked about it in Red Flags. So I go into more detail there. But basically, it's so complicated. Basically, he thinks John Wayne Gacy didn't act alone. He thinks he was connected to a nationwide sex trafficking ring.
Oh my gosh.
No big deal, like, whatever, like, just a nationwide sex trafficking ring of teenage boys. And he has, like, compelling piece of evidence.
Okay.
There are just little things like John Wayne Gacy was out of town when 3 of his victims were kidnapped. So how could he have kidnapped them? Yeah. We have his business records. So like, he was out of town. So, to this lawyer, that implies someone else was maybe doing the kidnapping. And anyway, I spoke to him on the phone and then like got into it more on Red Flags, but I just feel like the entire world is corrupt after talking to him. Like, he was just telling me that the guy who ran this ring, by the way, the trafficking ring is real. The guy who ran it is real. His name is John D. Norman. Like, this is all, like, you can find
verifiable. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The guy who ran the ring had all these index cards with names of clients, quote unquote, and it seems like there were some high-ranking politicians in there, and then the index cards all mysteriously went missing. And even to this day, the lawyer who I talked to is just running into some trouble with authority when he's like trying to get he's trying to get a death certificate changed for a Gacy victim because he exhumed the victim and found that it wasn't who the police said it was. And he's just running into reluctance. And I just got really paranoid that like everyone is corrupt, like everyone is involved, like all these authorities have this is just me speculating, but like all these authorities have a vested interest in keeping the story that John Wayne Gacy acted alone because they were all involved in this sex trafficking ring. Like, I just left the phone call being like, I don't trust anyone anymore.
Well, that'll keep you up.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Look, I trust you implicitly. And like I'm getting like QAnon conspiracy theorist vibes, like the sex ring that they said was real, which obviously isn't. But this doesn't sound like that because you're saying there's evidence.
I know. No, this is not QAnon. I know. Sound like I'm sliding that way, but I promise you, I'm not.
No, that's why I'm pointing it out because I know you wouldn't, and you wouldn't, and you
there's
aren't.
Evidence.
Oh my gosh.
Which is probably what a QAnon person would say, but there's real evidence.
Well, evidence not on YouTube or like a meme.
No.
We're going to link to that episode in the show notes because now I'm going to need to listen to it. Everybody's going to need to listen to it. We'll make sure your book is there.
Thank you.
I hope you can put that aside tonight and get a peaceful night's sleep.
Thank you.
And that you can trust people. But it's so good to have you back.
It was lovely to be back. Love it here.
Love you here as well. Anytime, doors always open. And congrats on all the major accomplishments of the last year.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for your new podcast.
At the heart of every crime, there's a lie.
In order to do this job well, you're going to have to learn to lie. But you're going to have to remember who you're lying to and when to lie and when not to lie.
But a lie is only powerful if you choose to believe it.
It all came out. All the story came out. It turned out he had 2 wives and 5 fiancés. That he wasn't marrying women because he loved them. He was actively impregnating women to rip them off for money, me being one of them.
So why do we fall for it every time?
My father told me at a young age, he says, Carl, the 2 easiest things to sell anybody, anything that'll improve their looks and anything that'll make them money. And that's what you want to sell.
Pretend is a documentary podcast about people pretending to be someone else. I interview real con artists, snake oil salesmen, and former cult members. Anyone living a lie. Search for Pretend wherever you get your podcasts.
Dialogue is a Yellow Tape Media production edited by Jason Usry and produced and hosted by me, Rebecca Sebastian. Please be sure to subscribe to Dialogue, a true crime conversation, wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media. We are at Dialogue Pod across all platforms. You can also drop me a note or a guest suggestion or sign up for my newsletter at RebeccaSebastian.com. Be sure to join me every Wednesday for a new episode and another killer conversation.